nationwide, small businesses do not currently have to comply with the CTA BOIR. Hey everyone, let's talk again about the CTA Beneficial Owner Information Report, and specifically the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of the CTA BOIR. Now, I have another video where there was an Alabama court that ruled that the law is likely unconstitutional, and I really gave a lot of praise to the judge in writing that opinion, and it was a ruling that I agreed with, where the judge said, yeah, this law is probably unconstitutional. But unfortunately, even despite that ruling, business owners across the country, an estimated 32 million beneficial owners of small businesses in the US, still had to file these beneficial owner information reports, which to me is an invasion of privacy, but that's the law under this Corporate Transparency Act, or CTA. Well, that Alabama ruling didn't stop the compliance. You still had to do that. You still had to file a report under FinCEN even after the Alabama ruling. But now there's a Texas ruling. This is late breaking news out of the Eastern District of Texas. That's a federal court where this judge has entered an injunction against the enforcement of the CTA, which means nationwide, small businesses do not currently have to comply with the CTA BOIR. Now, that's just of the shooting of this video, which is December 16th. That ruling came down on December 3rd. Now, how long is that injunction going to be in place? We don't know, but that's the rule as it is now. You don't, if you're a small business owner, currently you do not have to comply with the CTA BOI requirements. Now, in case you're curious, that December 3rd ruling comes from a case called Top Cop Shop versus Garland. And like I said, it's out of the Eastern District Federal Court in Texas. So higher level courts are going to take a look at this in all likelihood and determine whether this injunction or pause to the enforcement of the CTA BOIR requirement, the appeals courts and maybe even the United States Supreme Court will determine whether or not this law truly is unconstitutional. But this low-level district court, the federal district court, has determined that it is unconstitutional, so you don't have to comply for now. Now, the ruling from December 3rd has already had a lot of consequences, specifically in the wake of the uncertainty created by that district court's court ruling. The Senate, with support of House Republicans, have already determined that they need to look at this again. And in fact, they tried to pass a law in the defense bill for this year to basically redo the CTA and BOIR requirements, but you know how the federal government is. They didn't get around to it. They're kicking the can to next year. So they're hoping by 2025 or 2026, they can have better law that's more constitutional, frankly, in place for a freshened CTA BOIR requirement. So already, due to these court rulings, we're seeing the House and Senate saying we need to take another look at this. Now, if you watch my video about the Alabama court's ruling, you'll see that I complimented the judge for some really beautiful writing about the constitutional considerations. Now, in this case, it's no different. The Texas judge has some great lines as well. Take this one, for example. The judge writes, modern problems may well warrant modern solutions, but modernity does not grant Congress a roving license to legislate outside the boundaries of our timeless written Constitution. And like the court in Alabama, the Texas judge understands that the CTA has some really good aims. There's some worthy purposes here to prevent money laundering and things like that. And we can all agree that we don't want money laundering and we don't want bad actors staying secret. United States citizens, we have rights. And those rights can only be infringed upon if Congress has the ability to infringe upon those rights. It's not the other way around. Congress doesn't give us our powers. We have our powers and rights, and those can only be taken from us by the House and the Senate if the law is within the constitutional bounds. And here the judges are saying, wait a minute, this CTA infringes too much. It's not within the bounds that are granted in the Constitution. So specifically here, the federal judge here in Texas says the CTA represents a federal attempt to monitor companies created under state law, a matter our federalist system has left almost exclusively to the states. And second, the CTA ends a feature of corporate formation as designed by various states: anonymity. And frankly, my clients are small business owners and people who are interested in asset protection. They create entities under state law, not federal law, under state law, to provide anonymity, because I don't want somebody knowing what all assets are in my name and seeing how deep my pockets are. No, I'd rather have that within an LLC or a corporation. I want that anonymity. So Congress can't come in and say, well, I know those LLCs were filed under state law, but we're going to make a determination that we're going to peek behind that LLC anonymity wall and find out how deep your pockets are and what you really have. That's just not allowed. And the judge goes on here. He says, despite attempting to reconcile the CTA with the Constitution at every turn, the government is unable to provide the court with any tenable theory that the CTA falls within Congress's power. And even in face of the deference the court must give Congress, the CTA appears likely unconstitutional. And the Texas judge here breaks down the specific sections of the Constitution that he feels like the CTA, and I agree, that the CTA violates. First, you have Article 1, Section 8. Congress may only exercise those powers the Constitution expressly vests it with. The states and the people retain the remainder. Okay, so again, like I said earlier, you have rights. You don't get your rights from the House and Senate. No. You have those rights by default. And the limitations on those rights are very narrow. The government doesn't have the ability to monitor you and look inside your house and into your possessions without constitutional authority. And by the way, just to get kind of nerdy here for a second, the government laid on some really nice arguments, but the judge here just was buying none of it. He goes on for, I think the written opinion is like 13 pages long. So the judge goes into a lot of discussion about the constitutionality of the CTA, mostly about shooting down the government's arguments for why they think it is constitutional. The judge gives them a lot of weight and goes through all of those. So I think we also have to keep in mind that with the most recent presidential election and the new cabinet that's coming in, honestly, I think that's really changing the tenor of regulation in the United States. So here, under the previous administration, I think the government was a lot more comfortable with regulating people and with maybe a little bit more, being a little bit more towards intruding and having more governmental intervention, where now you have Elon Musk coming in with Doge. You have the incoming President Trump who says, look, let's limit intrusion. Let's limit regulation. So I think not only do you have these lower level courts going on saying, look, this is an unconstitutional law, the CTA is unconstitutional, but I think in the House and the Senate, you also have a completely different tenor, a different atmosphere that's more about freedom and less about regulation. So anyway, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think there are some positive attributes to the CTA, which both of these courts have recognized. But I think we can also say that our Constitution serves an important purpose, and there has to be a limitation on what the government can do and, you know, looking into our assets and things like that. So let me know down in the comments what you guys think about these rulings. If you haven't, the Top Cop Shop written opinion is online, and like the Alabama ruling, take a few minutes and read it. It's a really good read. I think you'll find it really entertaining and enlightening.